As we go ahead, choir.
Sing this is Susa ugwe sabawa Suzunde
For us,
imithandazo yethu Nkosi Ediblo efanose Borosebe Vanikaze Anfoche Souls are called to come to us, live and strive for freedom in South Africa. Island.
and that's how we kickstart. May you again remain.
Unity. See peace and justice all do so.
A huge round. A very good morning once again. My name is Anoni across different countries as well, joining us today. And of course, South Africa is quite a diverse nation with a neighbor. On your left, on your right, greet them. I'm hearing some chatter. I love that. And if you don't mind me asking, I'd like quite a number of people just to stand up and just greet us in the
Very much.
Okay,
Yeah,
sounds very familiar to ours actually. Very, very close. We had somebody with their hand up. Yes. Okay, there's enthusiasm which I absolutely love. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm from South Africa, right here. Tobela.
Let's take one more from the lady. Thank you so much, person of governance.
I am from South Africa. I am from South Africa. Ndao. I'm hearing Kilobedu speak for this groundbreaking discussion on democracy and development. As you would know, South Africa is celebrating 30 years of democracy, and we found it very important as the National Youth Development Agency to continent. Honor of introducing and acknowledging our esteemed guests, and that comes at the risk of me is I'm unable to pronounce the surname. But as the National Youth Development Agency, we have this message for young people as we chart ahead into the next fifth. There is no reward for sitting down and keeping quiet. The country will not be built if we sit on the youth of South Africa as the youth of the African continent to take up our space in serious tables. And we always say that if the table is not there, break it down and build a new one so that young people can have people to take a stand. This is the moment where young people have to decide what the future. Government is not doing anything. We're going to ask you, where were you when people were voting? Because it's your responsibility. The government is the government for the people, by the people, with the people. So there is no separation between the government and the people. You are the government. The Dean of the African Diplomatic Corps in South Africa, as well as the Pan-African, to say to you that the most difficult part is knocking on a door, and when the door opens and they find that you are a young person, that was astounding. There was never a moment that was astounding. There was never a moment where we felt like we're their children and they are saying, no, do this, do that. We were colleagues by the Pan-African Parliament because it's very rare to enter into spaces as young people and be treated with the necessary respect, especially as a colleague and to some as peers. They always project how they treat their children at home when their children are not having on Parliament. We've got in the House, ladies and gentlemen, the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Naledi Pandor. She needs no introduction. Women, we want to see this face that has shown us that it is possible.
Chimama, Chimama Cho, Chimama.
Inspiring, they too made. If you want the institution that makes ministers, I'm actually hinting. So when you are going, the young people are ready. So have you heard the call of the young people in South Africa? She said, I want to be counted. I want to be there. I want to make a contribution in shaping a world that is inclusive, a world that sees no age, that sees no color. They also have esteemed guests from the Diplomatic Corps, the Excellency, the Dean will just introduce. Without your presence, we've got board members of the NYDA as well here, Mr. Tuli Sandlela, the Chief Executive Officer. And in the NYDA, there's nothing under the sun that is beyond your reach. Reach for the stars. We are here for you. We're going to support you. We see you, and we're always saying to you, your dreams are valid. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and I wish us a very successful dialogue.
Time for us to get in the main podium. Honorable Chief of Fortune Churumbira on the 20 promise that he's going to learn a little bit of French, a little bit of Portuguese, but he also says, look, he's getting there when it comes to his Kiswahili. He wants this very parliament to be visible, have clear output, and make a positive impact. Please rise for His Excellency, Honorable Chief Fortune Churumbira.
Thank you, take your seats. Thank you, Director of Ceremonies, Dr. Naledi Pandor, Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, South Africa. But before I proceed, I would want again to, as introduced, I wrote on this continent and across the world. I believe you know what I mean. To me, she is now a minister of South Africa, of Africa, and of the world. Because for the, thank you, Minister, thank you, Honorable Maropone, Ramokopa, Minister in the Presidency, the Executive Deputy Chairperson of the NYDA Board, Karabo Mohale, member of the Diplomatic Corps, but I should not forget His Excellency, and then may I salute all of you and say welcome to Pan-African Parliament. This is the chamber where MPs from this continent, 55, 54, because one country is not yet a member of the Pan-African Parliament, but the other 54 are members. So each one sends 5 MPs who come to Midrand, and we meet here and debate on all issues, and I mean all that affect this continent. Representatives. And this is the premises of Pan-African Parliament, a third organ of the African Union. Of as who made me be here today. Very impressed. 3 days after the Republic of South Africa arrested everywhere, and 3 days thereafter we meet here to discuss democracy and the youth. And when you talk about, they went through a very exquisite, others in the mostly in the 60s, 63, 64, or in the 60s. But South Africa remained, as they used to say those days, on the yoke. And then the names like Nelson Mandela then emerge in that struggle. And we learn a lot from that. So I'm saying the timing is perfect. Authors on democracy. It's mainly written by authors from the West. But the real experience in Africa, and as a result, we meet here to salute the bravery and resilience of those who fought for equality and justice. And we celebrate the progress made towards and resilience. We won't be sitting here. There are some people, individuals, groups, organizations that made it possible 32 years ago in South Africa. And ourselves, most were not possible. Some few years back. And the world order today, the world governance order even today, is still not democratic. Still not democratic. So we want to say, when we come in the hope of instilling a sense of who says a race of people is like an individual man until it uses its own talent, takes pride in its own history, expresses its own culture, affirms its own selfhood, it can never fulfill. Raising it's not a youth anymore, and the other many. All those countries that attract us and we migrate to wherever we want to say this better. One strength is that they've never abandoned their own culture. Just do some research. Any country that you think is developed, and then ask, first of all, in what language do they learn? It's their own language. So this culture thing is the glue that makes you strong and go. But we have a danger that some youth think to be modern means abandoning being an African, being on culture. You think culture is synonymous with being primitive. And we are not developing as a result. And my message to the youth is that we get it wrong when we think we should embrace cultures from outside. And that, please, remember that there is no way you can go forward without knowing where you are coming from. You need to know the history. We need to be embedded in our own past and know exactly which trajectory we've traveled. And this is a challenge, of course, as we speak about the youth. But I want to acknowledge that this youth group is now the majority. It's now the majority on the continent of Africa. You are more than 60% of the population on this continent. And this continent cannot move forward if it does not include the youth. We can't move with the majority left out. So you have a very big responsibility as the youth. Very big responsibility. You have to determine the future. And how does Pan-African Parliament come in? Because I'm the president and I'm here as president of PAP. How do we come into all these things, into the equation of the youth? PAP is mandated by the African Union. If you go through what they call protocols and statutes of the AU, the Constitutive Act, they say the Pan-African Parliament is established, she said, a mandate to facilitate the active engagement of African peoples in the economic development integration of the continent. This is your parliament. This is your chamber. Anytime, whether you are in Cameroon, or in South Africa, Malawi, just tell us that we want to hold a conference. We as youth, we have issues. We want a venue which is international. And of course, we don't even make you pay. You pay nothing for spending 1 month in this chamber, deliberating on your issues. We don't make you pay. So it's yours. This is your place. This is your place. So you are welcome. And come not once, come many times. The African Union, our forefathers, they formed the AU in 1963. And after 21 years, they realized that they needed a parliament. Otherwise, after 21 years, it was realized that the OAU was a union of member states and not a union of African citizens. Because the union is of African citizens, this platform was given to you. Use it and we'll work with you and make sure that we achieve the development and improve the quality of life of citizens on this continent. And if you look at the articles of the Union, the Constitutive Act, Article 3 says the African Union should promote democratic principles and institutions and the popular participation in good governance. And this parliament was established to promote this one. I won't go into the details of the mandate of the parliament, but we're a parliament for everybody. Any issue that you think of, right to Pan-African Parliament and say, I think the issues of trade, I think the issues of air transport on the continent, agriculture, we can be assured that they will be brought to this chamber and shared with our superior organs, Executive Council and the Assembly of the African Union, and they will be acted upon. Because our mandate is to ensure the full participation of the people on this continent. I can't say everything about PAP, and we can't run this continent without the critical component of the youth. And that's why you have always said this youth, and we agree with you that nothing for us without us. Nothing for us, that's the youth speaking, it's not me. I'm just quoting the youth, I'm quoting you. Nothing for us without us. So we are very happy when you gather like this with ministers, with the Pan-African Parliament to deliberate issues of the youth. I won't go into the nitty-gritties of how issues, challenges of the youth. We have more presentations, we have more speeches coming that will get into more detail about that. But we're also committed as Pan-African Parliament, the Continental Parliament, on these issues. So you find that at PAP, we have what we call a permanent committee on gender, family, youth, and people with disabilities. We also have a youth caucus here at the Pan-African Parliament. So we also invite you to engage with the youth caucus. In fact, if in the future, if we know about the leadership of the National Youth Agency, Development Agency in this country, we would have invited a few MPs from our parliament to participate from the youth caucus. And we'll do it next time. But we do have a very vibrant youth caucus. Lastly, two messages. Youth, some say leaders of tomorrow. Some say, no, they're actually leaders today, not tomorrow. They are leaders today. But can I say, you are adults in training. The youth are adults in training. You are still going through what we call apprenticeship to become an adult. So ask yourself, where do you train yourself? Because if you don't ask yourself a question, so as I said, where is the training? The president of PAP says you are adults in training. So where does the training take place? I will not give you the answer, but by the end of today, we need to agree. Where does that training of the youth take place? Is it in class, in school? But you have to take yourself as people under training to become as you want to be, ministers, you want to be heads of state, everything. But you cannot just get there without the proper schooling, proper training, a proper coaching to get there. And when we gather like this, it's an opportunity to exchange some of those skills. And finally, the issue of youth apathy. Don't just complain. Be part of the revolutions. And please, our leaders today, everywhere, for them to reach where they are, they went through struggles. They really suffered also. And your role should not be to disassociate with your country, to disassociate with your leaders, and try to look to go to America or somewhere else and get some ideas from somewhere. Anyway, no, it's from here. Get your ideas from within your country, fight within your country, within your party, within your government. Don't despise your country. One thing about the Americans that people praise and say, I want to go to America, I want to go to America. They are very strong. They are very proud of being American. That is the strength number one. Be proud of being South African. Be proud of being Zimbabwean, of being Malawian. First, we are losing it because the majority of our people, the youth, yourselves, you want to be against your own country. And you think that's being very progressive. No, you are working against yourself. Each country has its own laws and its own citizens. If they give you a passport there, American or whatever passport, that does not make you, you're still an African. You are still an African. Even if you abandon the South African passport, you just have the American. The truth, you know what, when God comes, He will locate you in South Africa, not in America. He will locate you. The trial of your sins will not be in America, to be in South Africa. That's just a paper that you got that is American. Once we are proud ourselves as Africans, we will develop. Then we will also go for our own products. The major problem is that when you see something African, you shun it. You say, no, I want something that is coming from somewhere else. And the economist will tell you that it's all about demand and supply. It's all about demand and supply. If you people demand local goods, it means our economies will expand. There will be employment, youth employment. So when you go and say, I want to buy from outside, there will be no employment. China, look what they've done. They've come on Africa. They make sure that they also create a market. When they build even a shop, even the nails, they want to get them back from China. The door, they want it to come from China. The chair, that don't come from China. So they are creating production in China because there is a demand. So here they create demand. The problem with us is we import and create demand there, and they produce there, and we produce nothing. And in the end, we have unemployment. Anyway, I want another conference when this one ends so that we can continue with this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, His Excellency, Honorable Chief Fortune Churumbira. I'd like to echo your sentiments around moving quickly with the program. He said he's not going to touch on too much because there's many other individuals that are going to be joining us as well and standing on the podium. So we will indeed have another conversation. For sure. Just echo again, you do have quite a limited time to go through your speech. I will be sitting right here at the corner. I will signal you with 5 minutes. But when things get very tight and we find ourselves in the 1 minute mark, I might perhaps stand. So let's make sure that we keep to time. All right, so the second statement from today is from Prof. Eddie Maluka, the African Peer Review Mechanism CEO, who says that the continental body is working hard to ensure that more African countries subject themselves to good governance on the continent. Democracy, he says, should work for the people. And his statement will be delivered by his Chief of Staff. Please give him a huge round of applause.
Thank you very much, Program Director, and I would adhere to your directive for me to be extremely short, but just to observe all protocols that have been outlined by His Excellency, the President of our Parliament, His Excellency Chief Fortune Sharumbira, our gracious host. He mentioned something very important, probably that's something that young people should know, that the struggle against colonialism and indeed apartheid, we always say it took long, but we sometimes forget to tell you that it took 342 years. 342 years since Jan van Riebeeck of the Dutch East India Company settled in the Cape and established the Dutch Cape Colony, which was later taken over by the British, and the Dutch settlers migrated to the interior. They took the land that belonged to the native people in the interior and established three republics, the Orange Free State, the Orange Republic, the South African Republic, and the Natalia Republic that was later taken over by the British and named the Cape, the Natal colony. So it's wise that you know that the struggle took 342 years. I acknowledge with a deep sense of humility the privilege accorded to us as the APRM to address this important 30 years of freedom, intergenerational dialogue on democracy and development, organized by the National Youth Development Agency in close collaboration with the APRM and the Pan-African Parliament. On behalf of the APRM Continental Secretariat, CEO Professor Eddie Maluka, who is away on official mission, hence could not make it to this important event, we once again kindly wish South Africa happy 30th Freedom Day. May South Africa continue to be a land of freedom, stability, peace, harmony, prosperity, democracy, and development. We wish to express our sincere gratitude to the government and the people of South Africa. Since the 27th of April 1994, South Africa has been the beacon of reconciliation and cohesion, the untiring champion against imperialism, neocolonialism, genocide, and all injustices. A voice of courage, conscience, loyalty to principles, and values. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, when talking about democracy and development today, in celebration of 30 years of freedom in South Africa, it is worth mentioning that despite challenges South Africa is facing, the country is doing very well in terms of democracy and governance. The Economist Democracy Index, which provides a snapshot on the state of democracy worldwide, has scored South Africa 7.05 out of a scale of 10. The 2023 Democracy Index has ranked the country 47 in the world and 4 in Africa after Mauritius, Botswana, and Cape Verde. The Mo Ibrahim Index on African Governance, published every 2 years, has ranked South Africa amongst the 10 best performing countries on the continent in terms of good governance. The Mo Ibrahim Index of 2022 has ranked South Africa 6th on the continent after Mauritius, Seychelles, Tunisia, Cape Verde, and Botswana. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the APRM Second Generation Country Review Report of South Africa 2022, which was launched by His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa in December 2023, highlights that although post-apartheid South Africa has a vibrant political democracy, it is still a democracy under severe socio-economic distress. The report reveals that the end of apartheid did not end racial divisions and racism, nor did it solve the economic and social problems that have continued to beset the country's thriving democracy since 1994. The South African National Human Development Report 2022, developed by the UNDP in close collaboration with the government of South Africa under the theme Harnessing Employability of South African Youth, highlights the shocking paradoxes of South Africa's developmental trajectory. The report points out that although South Africa has a long legacy of colonization and apartheid, the country now faces the triple development challenges of slow growth, deep poverty, inequalities, and high level of joblessness. A detailed analysis of the youth unemployment scenario presented by the report reveals that the face of unemployment in South Africa is Black, young, and female. The report affirms that the country, and indeed the government, has the vision, the commitment, and the capacity of overcoming its youth unemployment challenge. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, with this crystal clear picture revealed to us by all these reports and indexes, perhaps what we should do in this dialogue is now to attempt to critically address the question, posed by our youth today. Our youth at the center of development. We should also find answers to the rallying call of our youth today. Can they hear us or can they see us? A critical reflection of these issues will indeed enable us to assist the government to effectively mainstream youth in South Africa's democracy and make them critical stakeholders for its development. In so doing, we should be inspired by the wise words of one of the great sons of Africa, a true revolutionary, a Pan-Africanist of note, a great teacher and a genuine leader, Amilcar Cabral, when he said, and I quote, "We should always bear in mind that the people, and indeed our youth today, are not fighting for ideas, for things in anyone's head. They are fighting to win material benefits, to live better in peace, to see their lives go forward, to guarantee the future for their children." Nkosi Singelele, Africa, God bless South Africa, God bless Africa. Thank you for your kind attention. Amanda.
Amandla! Amandla! How privileged are we to be sitting here today in dialogue after 30 years of democracy. Thank you so much, Chief of Staff. The last statement will be coming from His Excellency Andre Nzabayeke, the Ambassador of the Central African Republic and Dean of the African Diplomatic Corps in South Africa. He hopes that one day, maybe in our lifetime, our children will look around them and say how proud they are of what the generation has done in its respective countries. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for His Excellency Andre Nzabayeke.
As you know, usually ambassadors are very polite. But today, let me forget that and say also Amandla. Good morning. I'm Andre Zapek, as I've been introduced, the Dean of African Ambassadors. And I've been asked to introduce also my colleague, African ambassadors. As Chief Chirumbira said, we are aging, so I cannot see all of them here in this room. So if you allow me, because I'm not here alone, there are many here, I can see some. If they can just stand so that you understand that African missions are supporting what is going on. I can mention them: Kenya, Senegal, Ethiopia, Gabon, Namibia, Chad, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, yes. Lesotho, Algeria, the Gambia, and one more. Sorry? Guinea. So you see, we are many here to support this event. Libya, there is also Libya here with us. Thank you. Honorable Dr. Naledi Pandor, Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. Honorable Maropene Ramakopa, Minister in the Presidency. Your Excellency, Chief Fortune Charumbira, President of the Pan-African Parliament. Your Excellencies and heads of missions and international organizations, the entire leadership of the National Youth Agency, on behalf of African heads of diplomatic missions, I would like to congratulate South Africa, the land of Madiba, the land that is an example for many African countries because of its strong democratic institutions. 30 years of freedom in South Africa. That's also 30 years of peace and security. Very important issue on the continent. Congrats to the South African youth, a vibrant youth with strong performance in politics, music, sport, science, etc. Congratulations to the vibrant civil society of South Africa. Congratulations to the South African Parliament, including the House of Traditional Leaders. Congratulations to the ruling party in South Africa. Also, congratulations to the opposition in South Africa. As you know, without opposition, there is no democracy. Congratulations again to the judiciary, the media, for their independence role they are playing, and that serve really as model for many countries on the continent. Of course, I will not forget our host. Congratulations to the Pan-African Parliament, also to the other African institutions here in the country, the other African Union institutions, like the African Peer Review Mechanism, like the AUDA NEPAD, for the effort they are making to promote democracy. Congratulations to the continent globally. If we look around, we see that more and more democratic elections are taking place on the continent, despite some setbacks, but there are progress, a lot of progress since I've been born. I can tell you that I'm not young. Since I've been born, I've seen progress going. I've seen election taking place. I've seen free media on the continent. A lot of them now in place. Free civil society on the continent. Congratulations also to our founding fathers. In 30 years, South Africa has gone a long way. The continent has made a lot of effort. When I was young, my parents has nothing to say, very little, because I was born still in the colonial time. The young people, we didn't have much to say. Our parents were the ones who were deciding for us. The risk of today for the youth, there are still a lot of risk for the youth that we see on the continent. Issue of malgovernance, unemployment creates lack of opportunities for the youth, lack of vision for the future. The consequence for the youth is that many of them, as we see in some countries, they join the armed groups and they become victims of manipulations, particularly by politicians. We commend South African government and the National Youth Agency in South Africa for the effort to take into account the aspiration of the South African youth. Countries that has not understood that the youth is a future are those that are still behind and not making sufficient progress. African aspirations remain the unity of the continent. Let's favor exchange of young people. Let's promote internship on the continent between Africans. Tourism, let's promote tourism on the continent so that our young people can know each other better, and it will strengthen the foundation of the effort we are making for a united Africa. On behalf of my colleagues, I wish you all productive dialogue.
His Excellency, thank you so much, and congratulations to you as well for all the incredible work that you have done. And indeed, without opposition, there is no democracy. It's time for us to prepare for an address on building stronger diplomatic partnerships for sustainable development, what the role of international relations is in democracy and governance. Our next speaker is not just a beacon of hope, but an unshakable catalyst for change, who faces challenges head on with conviction in her voice. Speaking at the 3rd International Diplomas of Humanity Conference last year, the minister said that the world is a very troubled place. And she doesn't want us to pretend that it is easy, because it is not. But she hopes that those in positions of power will rise up, and rise up. Let's stop talking. All the world needs are a few good men and women. The most progressive thing to do is to unite and take action. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad you have risen for the one and only, the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of South Africa, Dr. Naledi Pandor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Program Director. I must confess that it is very nice to have young people clapping for me. It's most unusual. Normally, they're saying things like, why are you still here? You should retire or go and look after your grandchildren and stuff like that. And I usually say to them, my grandchildren have parents who must look after them. It's not my job to look after grandchildren. And then they say, but when are you going to leave Parliament? You should go. We're tired of you. And I say, just to irritate you, I'll be here till I'm 90. All right, so it's lovely to get this welcome from you all. Allow me to begin by recognizing the Program Director, the President of the Pan-African Parliament, Chief Fortune Chirumbira, my colleague who I'm told will join us, Minister of Justice, Minister Lamula, my colleague, Minister Marupini Ramokgopa, Minister in the Presidency with one of the most difficult jobs of monitoring and evaluation, our colleague, the Deputy Minister of Youth in Namibia, Dr. Emma Kantema Gaumas. We welcome you here, Deputy Minister. The Dean of the African Diplomatic Corps, and all members of the Diplomatic Corps present here, this morning, representative of the CEO of the APRM, members of parliament joining us today, and traditional leaders present in this meeting, and all distinguished delegates. Well, we are, as we have this conference, in the midst of celebrating 30 years of democracy for South Africa. Through this celebration, we have a unique opportunity as South Africans and fellow Africans to reflect on the journey we have traveled and to consider and highlight the milestones that we have achieved as a people, as a government, as a country. It's also an opportunity for us to pay homage to the many leaders of our struggle who sacrificed so much so that we could enjoy the freedom and democracy we have in South Africa and on the continent today. When I was a young academic, before Bulelani Ngcuka persuaded me to accept being on the list of the ANC for parliament, I had the ambition to become a professor, and eventually I anticipated I would become a vice chancellor of a university. But then Advocate Bulelani Ngcuka persuaded me otherwise, and other colleagues in the ranks of the African National Congress. But when I listened to a certain professor earlier this week talking about 30 years of democracy and claiming that nothing had been achieved, I was very glad that I had changed careers, because I wouldn't like to be a professor without analytical capability or intellectual truth. For many of our young people, the stories of these struggle stalwarts are not always well known to them, but it is vital that we do share with our young people that our struggle was one of pain, was one of trauma, but that for those who fought in the trenches, victory was always certain. They knew freedom would come, and indeed freedom came. And we need to appreciate the role that they played while we embrace the new opportunity. I think in their memory, we have an obligation to carry on their legacy and fight as a collective, as Chief Chirumbura said, for a better future for our people, and ensure that we really curtail the widening levels of inequality and ensure all people enjoy opportunity. To accomplish these tasks, we need all our young people and their energy to build the new dawn that our president speaks about, so that we can truly ensure that this is a country for all who live in it. I believe our young people have a critical task of playing a meaningful role in shaping and determining our country's future. And they also, as they play this role, should ensure that they decisively address our triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and joblessness. And do recall, while I refer to joblessness, that I believe opportunity of work exists in many dimensions, not just in seeking employment, but also in being an entrepreneur and creating employment. So we need to begin to embrace the many dimensions of what it might take to end the current challenge of lack of livelihood. Our young people must sustain the legacy of democracy and should seek to build a fairer and more prosperous society. One way of doing this is to embrace democracy. And by embracing democracy, I'm not saying vote ANC like I will do. I am saying that what you must do is you must participate in the upcoming elections so that those who gave their lives to ensure that all South Africans could vote lie in rest knowing that they did not make their extreme sacrifice in vain. I know there are many people who are irritated with the government, who feel we've not made the progress that we should. Well, as a student of history, I can tell them there is no transition that occurs in just 3 decades fully. It merely begins, but it takes a very long time to achieve the ambitions that we have. And we need to recognize that reality. And what we will become aware of is over time, as we evaluate our progress, at each stage of a decade, we will be able to see that indeed advances are being made. So it's vital that you participate, that this democracy becomes your democracy, and that you own it by participating in it and not by excluding yourself. I can tell you, the day after the election, if you decided I'm a voter who's registered but I won't vote, you're going to feel really angry with yourself. So rather, go and put your cross. Maybe not where I'm going to put it, but go and put it anyway. Because then you will be a participant in our democracy. And that is what was fought for. I was asked to talk about partnerships, international partnerships for advancing democracy and development. I want to begin by saying one of the most important changes that occurred on the African continent was the embrace of democracy and the commitment to implement and search for practices of good governance. One of the things we must never allow to happen is disrespect for the right of our people to choose who should govern them. This is a very important aspect of democracy, and it must be non-negotiable. But we also have to begin to get public representatives and governments that understand that their role is to respect the people's right to choose their own leaders as well as their own destiny. Too many countries on our continent have a democratic deficit. Indeed, it's true that there have been changes, there have been advances, but there's inadequate democracy, and we need to do more to build it throughout the continent of Africa. We also must ensure that we empower young people to be able to drive this change for the good for our continent. You will recall that our former president, President Thabo Mbeki, framed the notion of the rising of Africa by coining the concept, the African Renaissance, and by placing it firmly at the center of South Africa's foreign policy. So for South Africa, Africa is at the heart of our foreign policy. And you would recall President Mbeki further articulated this significance through his speech at the adoption of our Constitution on the 10th of May, 1996, when he said, "I am an African," and set out through that speech the framework of an African agenda for South Africa. Following that important and epoch-marking speech, South Africa became actively involved in the transformation of the Organization of African Unity into the African Union, and our President Mbeki served as the first chair of the newly established African Union. Now, it's always important to recognize the significance of the Organization of African Unity to South Africa, and hence the significance of having Africa as our priority focus in our foreign policy. I often tell journalists who interview me on this question of Palestine that, one of the intriguing realities of our history of struggle is that all African members of the Organization of African Unity stood with the anti-apartheid cause. And the Palestinian people are unfortunate because they're not getting a similar support from their region, but with us, Africa stood with us. And thus we must always stand with Africa. We've got to address on our continent if we are to achieve the level of progress that is necessary for true development. We've got to combat unconstitutional changes of government on the continent. We must tell the military that they haven't been given the wisdom of knowing how you govern democratically. They should remain in the barracks, and they must allow the people democratically to choose the governments of their choice. We know, of course, that the African Union has tried to play an important role in sanctioning countries that don't respect democracy. But there has been criticism of the African Union in that it has not appeared to take any action against leaders on the continent who believe they are traditional leaders and can rule forever. We need to have an African Union that also speaks out against such practices. We have, as the African Union, the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance. It calls on member states to identify illegal means of accessing power or staying in office, including identifying refusal to relinquish office after free, fair, and transparent elections, and constitutional changes that infringe upon the principles of democratic change of power, and that we, as the African Union, should sanction those responsible. We have failed on this part, and it is diminishing our enjoyment of full democratic practice. So it's an aspect we need to attend to more assiduously. Now, as South Africa, one of the things we've tried to do in our international relations is to promote democracy, but also to advance sustainable development as a platform for our international engagements on the continent and globally. We believe to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we need to strengthen partnerships with developed and emerging economies to stimulate economic growth, trade, and investment. We have strong partnerships with the North countries, the more developed, richer countries, as well as with the United Nations in the area of peace and security, which is so important for our continent. And we have, as South Africa, made a major contribution to conflict resolution and peacemaking as part of our international diplomatic efforts. As South Africa, we believe as a country and government that without peace, you cannot have development, and without development, you will not have peace. Africa and its peaceful progress are at the heart of our policy and will remain so. We intend, as South Africa, to play a more proactive role in enhancing our peacemaking role and to build partnerships with others on the continent for stability and sustainable peace. Our country, when it returned to the international community, claimed its rightful space among the community of nations and emerged as a beacon of hope to many, having achieved a successful and peaceful transition from an oppressive apartheid state to a democracy today. We became actively involved in a range of mediation and negotiation efforts, playing a pivotal role in a number of peace processes. Just 2 weeks ago, I was part of President Ramaphosa's delegation to South Sudan. And you know, when you have these diplomatic meetings, poor ministers can't say anything. We just watch our presidents. And if we think they're putting a foot wrong, we sort of pinch them or we send a paper across the table. And President Ramaphosa decided that he must meet all the leaders of the various groupings in South Sudan to persuade them that the practice of democracy and thus the implementation of the agreement on peace was an important undertaking that all of them should honor. Now, among the leaders, there are gradations of agreement. There are those who fully support implementing the agreement. There are those who, yeah, maybe, but then there are those against. So I watched President Ramaphosa with great interest on how he would engage those who are totally against. And I was quite intrigued by President Ramaphosa's negotiating capabilities. So, wow, you know, because they kept saying all sorts of things, and he'd say, no, but you're not telling me what the real problem is. And then they'll speak and speak and speak. And he says, you still haven't told me. What is it that you are after? And in the end, they spill the beans. And he then helps to set in process the return to acceptance of a peaceful process. And I thought, my goodness, we are so lucky to have engaged leaders who can speak to others and persuade for peace. It's such an important attribute that our country has. Now, don't tell anyone I've told you that story, because I shouldn't. But we're also looking at how we might, as South Africa, strengthen the security architecture within the Southern African Development Community and, of course, in the African Union. Let me explain what I mean. You know that today we are seeing the bombardment of innocent Palestinian civilians who played no role in the Hamas attack of October 7th. Those innocent civilians have no protection whatsoever. It should be the responsible of the United Nations to ensure peace enforcement and protection of civilians. What the current calamity illustrates is that we don't have proper security architecture, which can, through leadership of AU or SADC or the United Nations, offer protection to ordinary civilians who have no role in a conflict and played no contribution in initiating it. So we believe that there needs to be very firm attention to the matter of security architecture within our region, at the continental level, and globally through the United Nations. We also believe that the United Nations should play a greater role in resourcing African Union-led peace operations, and also ensuring that there are higher levels of gender mainstreaming and gender responsiveness when we have AU and UN peace missions. We support the boosting of international partnerships, including ensuring that we have long-standing partnerships on the continent that support the ambitions of the African Union. We associate ourselves very, very directly with the Secretary General of the United Nations' view that we should accelerate and scale up implementation of the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development Goals. He has said that the holistic approach to implementation of all three pillars of sustainable development is required, and we support him fully in this global agenda. We believe that as developing countries, we will only achieve sustainable development if we have a massive scale-up in provision of support from the richer countries of the world. We need the support in Africa, in the least developed countries on our continent and elsewhere, in landlocked countries, as well as in small island developing states. We know that domestic resources are insufficient for the key priorities within the Sustainable Development Goals. And it is important that we have support of finance, of technology transfer, and skills building in order to be able to address all the objectives of the SDGs. Before I'm stopped by the program director, I also want to say one of the things that we need to do is that we must address the ending of the dependence of Africa. Africa is an extremely rich continent with a majority of poor people. Largely, the reason is we do not control our own resources. This inadequacy was clearly illustrated when we were confronted with the COVID-19 pandemic. We discovered in that crisis that the world is extremely selfish, and that where the rich have a solution, they will utilize the solution for themselves first and will think about us at the end. And so in response to the situation we faced, we decided as South Africa that South Africa and the continent needed to build their own capability of vaccine production. And we had to ensure that whenever we need them, vaccines would be readily available on our continent. We worked through the World Trade Organization to temporarily suspend intellectual property rights so that we could have access to the patent and all the intellectual property associated with the then established COVID-19 vaccines and other technologies related to vaccine production. Because what was happening was the IP was there, it was patented, we could not have access to it, and we said we want a temporary easing of the regulations so that we could enjoy access. I don't want to waste your time by telling you what a difficult journey we traveled to persuade members of the WTO. That even in a case where you seek to save lives, people are more interested with the profit they make from controlling the intellectual property. But in the end, in persuading a number of the developing country members of the WTO, and particularly in partnering with India, we were able to secure that cease. And it was a very important step. So working with India today, we are collaborating on genomic sequencing to further research on COVID-19 and the virus's mutations. The leadership of India and South Africa gained important experience out of fighting for the waiver at the WTO, and also through securing global support for development of manufacturing capacity in Africa and other developing regions. Today, South Africa is the Africa Regional Hub, and there are 8 other spokes on the continent where we are developing this capacity, and it's extremely important for our continent. A further area in which I believe we can reduce our dependence as Africa is through implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, a very vital agreement and a flagship program of Agenda 2063 of the African Union. Currently, trade within our continent, or intra-African trade, is at around 16%, and we want to increase our share of world trade as Africa which at the moment, in terms of products we send out, stands at around 3% of global export output. Totally inadequate figures. And we need to change this. In order to do so, we must achieve economic integration, we must achieve industrialization on the continent, we must secure infrastructure development to ensure that the logistics are in place to secure our ability to trade more effectively. We've got to increase productive capacity on the continent, have stronger regional value chains, manufacture more effectively quality products, and create economies of scale. So the work we've done of South Africa's automotive sector, also utilizing Lesotho for part of the components for the cars produced in South Africa, builds a very positive value chain that we need to really draw on for increasing Africa's participation in the world automotive sector. So I'm really thrilled that South Africa has taken the AFCFTA very seriously and that we commenced trading in January last year and that the majority of African states have now ratified the free trade agreement, which will vastly change Africa's landscape. Once implemented fully, the free trade area will connect 1.3 billion people with a combined GDP of around 3.3 billion US dollars. And all of us as entrepreneurs can benefit from that opportunity. As Africa, we have 650 million consumers today, and we will have a significant African middle class by 2030. So we really believe the AFCFTA has come at the right time, that this is Africa's time, and that the youth must take up all these opportunities and make good on them. So I say to young people that our international relations have been directed at enhancing diplomacy between South Africa and the rest of the African continent, but also strengthens our collaboration and development partnerships with countries of the North. As South Africa, we are not anyone's enemy. I always tell my foreign minister colleagues, we don't seek to make enemies of anyone. What we seek to create are opportunities for our country, our people, and for the continent. And where we see wrong, we will take a moral stand. So on the question of Palestine, we are clear. It is immoral what is happening to the Palestinian people. We will also take a stand on what is happening in Sudan, on what is happening in the Sahel, and several other African countries. South Africa must play a role equitably everywhere to ensure peace and development and to utilize our achievement of democracy to support the achievement of democracy and development in all parts of the world. So for us, when we talk international relations, we say a better South Africa, a better Africa, a better world. This is our commitment in international relations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Minister Dr. Naledi Pandor. Personally, I could listen to you speak all day. I really could. Thank you so much for being such an inspiration to us all, and what an honor it is for us to be in your midst. All right, so we're going to take a little bit of a musical break. We're going to bring back the Soweto Gospel Choir to come up on stage. There'll be a video that will be playing. So as the video plays, can the choir please come to the stage? And please, ladies and gentlemen, feel free to dance along, to hop along, and sing along with the Soweto Gospel Choirs. Please also just excuse our dignitaries for a quick second, and as soon as they're back, we'll then commence with today's program. Soweto Gospel Choir, please make your way, and you may play the video on the screen.
My name is Dimpon Baba. I'm one of the farmers here in a place called Indermine in the northern part of Tswane, just near Hammanskraal. The size of our farm is 136 hectares, of which 51 hectares is arable. We are producing grains, both summer grains and winter grains. We just recently harvested soybean, and we are preparing the land, which we're going to plant in the 1st of May. Yeah. Before we could obtain this farm from government, I had an opportunity to be selected as one of the candidates to attend the summer school at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil by the National Youth Development Agency in the year 2022. So the opportunity that I grabbed in both hands, it gave me exposure, and people could be able to recognize the work that we have been doing. Then when we came back, then I was awarded this farm by the government, which was in in September in 2022. So yeah, we have been producing since then up until the last harvest that we had now. Even though farming is a bit challenging because of the effects of your load shedding and climate change, but as young people, we are resilient, and we will be able to safeguard the food security of this country, and we are confident there for the future.
Oh,
Nice. Woo! Hey, they're good. Are they doing cheese back?
So se ti di Jehovah, sees us on Jehovah, we walk away. So se ti Jehovah, sees us on Jehovah, we walk away. See my mind. Jehovah, we walk away.
Are we standing okay? Okay.
See my mind. Jehovah, we walk away. See my mind. Jehovah, we walk away. So say when Jehovah sees us home, Jehovah, we walk away. When Jehovah sees us home, Jehovah, we walk away.
Would like to commence with the program. If people can just quickly settle in. See, there are a couple of people at the back. A huge round of applause for the Soweto Gospel Choir. I see we've also got our dignitaries back in Parliament. All right, so our next presentation is by Mr. Tulani Chefuta, proudly South African brand member, who believes that in order to unleash our potential to attract investment, to grow the economy, create employment, and fight poverty, we must double our efforts and address cross-cutting binding constraints. And if addressed decisively, these factors can serve as critical enablers. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Tulani Chefuta.
Program Director, good morning and thank you very much for this opportunity. Let's also, with greatest of respect, rise on the already established protocols. I have to say this so that I feel free. As a confession that I honestly don't know what I did to myself this morning. I had not worn a tie since 2020, and now I feel so suffocated. Let me just appreciate the collective effort resulting into this dialogue, all-important dialogue between the leadership of our National Youth Development Agency, all board members present, and the management led by the CEO. The NYDA has proven in every given opportunity that investments going into young people are not going to waste. Thank you very much. The APRM Continental Secretariat and the Youth Office, Lennon and the Office of the CEO, there is no program of the APRM that I ever attended that did not have an integral program focused on young people. And we comment that when we are in our own space, we are going to deliver a lecture on what that means for mainstreaming of youth development, but not today. The Pan-African Parliament and the fact that even those of us who appear further down there in the list can have hope of being in the Parliament. Thank you very much. I am making this brief presentation on behalf of the South African chapter of the African Peer Review Mechanism, the APRM. And I must indicate that the APRM in South Africa, our current National Governing Council, was established in 2020, in March 2020. It was established as a multi-sectoral council. It took us just more than 2 months to establish the National Governing Council. The primary reason we took so long is because when all sectors of society were given an opportunity to nominate members of the council, it was male, male, female, male, 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 female, female, male, 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 male. And we were confronted with an untenable situation where you had 60% male and 40% female. And government stood fast and said, we are not appointing this council until there is gender equality. And today we are sitting with more women in the National Governing Council than males. And one of the members of our National Governing Council is indeed yours truly, Mamna Lady Pando. She's a member of the NGC. You see good leaders by allowing themselves to be led as well. But when we set our first National Governing Council meeting, I have to say this, Minister. We were to elect the council on its entirety is appointed by the president, and then the council will meet and elect the chairperson and the deputy chairperson. There was a unanimous nomination of a certain Tulani Chefuta as the chairperson. Any different view? No, there's no different view. when the chair was closing the session, and then there was a hand at the end to say, yes, we may not oppose the nomination, but can we get a brief profile of this Thulani Chefuta? What are his academic credentials? And then we presented the credentials, and she said, we fully support the nomination of our new chairperson. Esteemed colleagues, the primary task of the NGC of the APRM is to undertake a self-assessment of the country on how the country is faring or doing in about 5 themes. The first of those is democracy and political governance. The second focus area on economic governance and management. The third focus area on corporate governance. The fourth focus on socio-economic development, and lastly on state resilience. And so we got into this task and were seized with the responsibility of undertaking that country self-assessment. And when we look back, we get proud by the fact that our National Governing Council could undertake that review in 17 months, a task which the country could not do in 6 years prior to our appointment. We were truly, truly focused on the task of making sure that we deliver on this. And so our report, as indicated earlier on, went through the processes of cabinet, it was approved, and our president was peer-reviewed by his peers, meaning other presidents of the African continent that are member states of the APRM in February 2022. And at that time, it is important to note that the president of South Africa was also the chairperson of the African Union in 2021. The president of South Africa was also the chairperson of the African Peer Review Forum of the Heads of State in 2021 and in 2022. And so the pressure was very high on us, not to compete with anyone, but to enable the president to lead by example, that his own country gets to be assessed and peer-reviewed in the duration when he was still the chairperson of those 2 important instruments of the African Union, a task that was successfully achieved. And the results of the peer review by other presidents to our president on the report that we produced gave us a balanced outcome. A balanced outcome in the sense that there are those things that other African leaders believed South Africa is doing right and excelling in them, and other African countries can learn from South Africa on those. There are also those areas that they believed that South Africa can improve on and make better and even learn from other African countries. And each of those thematic areas, there are high-profile issues that were raised. For example, if you look into the theme of democracy and political governance, the issue of electoral reforms reigned supreme in that review. And what it challenges us is that we seem to be too casual with our democracy, and especially our electoral processes. The fact that a person can sit board and decide that, oh, there's elections in a few months' time, I'm going to contest elections. We seem to be gambling with the future of our country way too easily. And so all those changes in electoral reforms must go to enhance those, such that anyone who avails themselves for public office must stand the scrutiny of being good for the public service that they say they will be serving. On the theme of economic governance and management, there are a few things that were highlighted, but I'm going to choose one for convenience. And that is the issue of youth unemployment. And if all else fails in addressing the plight of youth unemployment, it is the single factor that can challenge even the very fiber of our democracy. If the challenges of youth unemployment are not addressed, we may have no democracy to talk about tomorrow. We may have no development to pride ourselves about. And so we believe that we have not truly articulated the reasons why we cannot afford, not as government, but as society and as the entire African continent, why we cannot afford the high levels of youth unemployment that we're experiencing. On issues that relate to corporate governance, the governance and performance of state-owned enterprises were ranked very high, including corruption. That in the very same challenge that we speak about of youth unemployment, where public resources go into private pockets, they take away resources from providing public goods and services and even stimulating the economy for the employment of the very same young people that we're talking about. And poverty reigned high on issues of socio-economic development. With regards to state resilience, issues relating to disaster early warning signals and responsiveness of society were also highlighted. And it is important that when we have this discussion, we must look back and acknowledge the achievements that were made under the chairpersonship of South Africa at the helm of the APR Forum of the Heads of States. We view it as an achievement that a sitting president and the chair of the Forum of the Heads of State will be peer-reviewed when he is still the chairperson. Because in most instances, leaders point at others to do things that they do not do themselves. And the president of South Africa did not do that. It is under the leadership of the president of South Africa that the APRM had the highest number of accessions. That is the countries that agree voluntarily to be members of the APRM outside the window of the establishment of the APRM. It happened under the leadership of the President of South Africa. It is under the leadership of the President of South Africa that we had the highest number of reviews that were ever undertaken under the auspices of the APRM. APRM has always been pulling through with 4 themes. The theme on state resilience was inspired by occurrences and prevalence of COVID-19, and it was introduced around 2021. South Africa was the first country to be peer-reviewed on state resilience, and it still remains the only country that has been reviewed in that theme. And so we have set the agenda of what it should be. Currently, we are leading the process of developing a program of action that will implement all those areas of weaknesses that have been identified. And here is the most important part about this program of action for implementation. It is not a program of action for government. It is a program of action that civil society must identify with and say, we raise our hand to be counted as part of the solution, and there are things that we are going to implement as part of this program of action. The same with young people and all other sectors of society. We are going to lead the biggest citizen national observer mission for the 2024 national and provincial elections. The youth sector is represented in our National Governing Council. We had dedicated consultations that were purely focused on youth development and how this country assessment report should integrate issues that affect young people. We had several consultations, and there was an organized wave of young people under the South African Institute of International Affairs, which led that process of interacting with us to a point where we can be proud to say that across all the themes of our report, issues of youth development are embedded there in mainstreaming. We also have a dedicated section that also covers that work on youth development. Now, here is the case for youth development in all of this. We already know that South Africa, like the rest of the African continent, we are riding on a wave of youth bulge, which means a youthful population than any other population group. That youth bulge presents us with two things. It presents us with threats and opportunities. The youth bulge becomes a threat to society if you sit and fold your arm and say, we have a very vibrant, youthful population in South Africa. They are a ticking time bomb, and do nothing about that. They present us with opportunities only if we do one thing and one thing only, and that is to invest in the lives of young people. And then we can draw a demographic dividend. It is a simple equation. You don't draw dividend where you have not made an investment. It's as simple as that. So society cannot sit and have high expectations of young people whose young people they do not invest in, from families, neighborhood, communities, and all our national institutions. Here is the second factor about the case for youth development. When you sit and look into the challenges that are confronting young people, you may fill a page and go into the next page of the problems that they are confronted with. But guess what? Invest a bit of effort, engage young people. They have solutions to every problem that they are confronted with, if given an opportunity. And so we must leverage on their energies and youthfulness and bring them into the fold, not as passive beneficiaries of the goodwill that will be delivered by those in government and those in leadership, but together with them at the helm of all those interventions. And we must promote meaningful youth engagement by reaching young people in their own spaces. Does not help to say we want young people are apathetic. In fact, we must make this assertion that young people are not apathetic. If you go into communities, young people express their youthfulness through sports, arts, culture, and many other popular youth cultures. That is not apathy. Even today, there is no political party that would be claiming legitimacy of being in government, be it in a municipality, in a province, nationally, without the youth vote. And so where does that youth vote come from if these young people are apathetic? The case for youth engagement is not for window dressing, or should not be for window dressing. Youth engagement is the only factor that can account for sustainability of interventions that we do, be it in communities, be it in government, be it even in business. Without the youth factor, there is no solution that will ever be sustainable in our society. And therefore, we must promote youth participation in democracy and good governance. We have already made a point that for any party to govern South Africa, it needs the popular youth vote. And that popular youth vote must come with the appreciation that, as embedded in our constitution, young people should vote and be voted for. We must imbue our democracy with the exuberance of youthfulness of our young people currently. It is only young people that can engage in the substance of the manifestos of these political parties that are so many in our political system. There are people who get away with murder in this silly season, where people say they don't present any solution in any discussion. Their solution is remove ANC. We are a compact that stands to remove ANC. Sure, good, well, fine. Remove the ANC and then what? So it is disingenuous to suggest that the solution to poverty is to remove ANC. I refuse. It is disingenuous to suggest that the solution to youth unemployment is to remove the ANC. Yes, ANC may have its own problems, right? But take us serious at least and present that which you stand for as a direct contrast to the problems that we are confronted with. Address poverty with solutions that address poverty. We have had an opportunity of a paradox of Tintswalo in South Africa. And the only plea I have for young people is that let's just be sober in this paradox of Tintswalo. We have polarized our society to such an extent that you don't have to stand. This is my last point. We have polarized our situation to such an extent that those who want to make a point that nothing has been done in these 30 years of democracy become blind to even where they are standing themselves. That if it was not as an opportunity of democracy, they would not even be political players, because political participation was a preserve of the few. So the fact that you have a voice, it means you are a beneficiary of democracy. Let's just assume all else has failed. So that means you have a claim to this democracy. And it does not mean that because you are a beneficiary of democracy, you must be blind to the challenges of the day. Equally, of those who go and highlight what have been the gains of democracy must be alive to the challenges that we are confronted with. And in all of this, young people are not passive beneficiaries, but they should be positioned as part of the solution. Where I come from, I always challenge that. As young people, we must be vigilant. As aspiring social scientists, not VCs, you can't say today is worse and not say in comparison to what. And there's a comparison I always make. Where I come from, a small town of Craddock in the Eastern Cape. Today, there is no shack in that township. It's not by magic. It's democracy. Today, there is no bucket system in that township. It's not by magic. It's democracy. There is no household that does not have electricity. We're all flushing. All good and well. That has also generated its new challenges of the day, which we should not point to anyone else, but position ourselves as part of the solution to that. Siyabonga.
Thank you, Mr. Tulani Chifuta. If we can just look to the screens as we play a video before I announce our next speaker.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nokolum Seleko, and I am the founder of Elegante. By profession, I am a jewelry designer and a manufacturer. Elegante is an award-winning jewelry brand. The company was established in 2017, and currently we actually supply 6 local brands, which I'm so proud of. The brand has 4 amazing young jewelers as well that I work with. Studying in Italy for 2 years actually broadened my mind because I was able to take all the information that I got from Italy and implemented it into the pieces that we make now. So when the opportunity came to actually go to apply to go to Singapore, I was like, oh my gosh, that's great. So I can learn and see what other people are doing in the jewelry industry and come and implement it here as well. Being exposed to an international market, it actually gave me an amazing idea that because I am actually based at an incubation, which is the Koroleni Jewelry Project, it gave me the idea that I can also take all the other designers that are here, designers and manufacturers, to the world. Being in business is not for the faint-hearted. It hasn't been an easy road at all. But what I would like to say, now you need to get up and hustle, wanted with your own. Young people are more than capable of doing whatever that they put their mind into. I mean, making this from scratch, from granules, melting. I would honestly like to take this opportunity to also thank the government, especially with the NYDA, with all the opportunities that they are giving to the young people. Ngiyabonga kakhulu.
Uzoithola kanjani uhlele khoneni? Huge round of applause to the NYDA as well for the incredible work that they did with Elegante. All right, our keynote address for today is from Honorable Minister Marupini Ramokgopa, who once said, you must ask the difficult questions and match them with decisiveness. Our country's democracy is built on the prescripts of the Constitution that underscores leaving no one behind. To change this narrative, it will require that we all ask, how do I improve? What is my contribution? Ladies and gentlemen, may we all rise for Honorable Minister Ramokgopa for the National Development Plan keynote address. And she looks incredible too.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much. You know, I'm a bit confused in a sense that when I was still in the NYDA, Thulani Chefuta was also the president of SAIC, but he still speaks like he's still in the youth sector. We are no longer youth, we are now the elders of society. When they start talking about dowry and amalobolo, we also are part of those. So we can actually say, young people, stop this and stop that. And we must be respected because we have earned where we are. But anyway, thank you very much for what you have said. Let me take this opportunity, of course, to say good morning and recognize, of course, our wonderful program director. And also take this opportunity and acknowledge Honorable Chief Fortune Charumbira, President of the Pan-African Parliament. Also recognize the presence of Honorable Dr. Naledi Pandor, Minister of DERCO. Also take this opportunity and acknowledge Honorable Ronald Lamola, Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development. Take this opportunity, of course, and recognize the presence of the Dean of the African Diplomatic Corps and all the other ambassadors that are here today. Let me recognize Your Excellency, Ms. Lindiwe Khumalo, the Pan-African Parliament clerk, the executives from APRM, as well as, of course, the chairperson of APRM South African chapter. Let me take this opportunity to also recognize Ms. Karabo Mohale, the executive deputy chairperson of NYDA board. If I must say this, and I must just speak a little bit about her, Minister Pandor. When I was still in the ANC Youth League, they actually bullied me as younger ladies that grew up in front of me to actually stand to be the president of the ANC Youth League. And I said, no, I don't think I would like to do that. And they said, but if not now, when? And if not us, who? I still remember that very well. So I was bullied into doing it, and we tried, but the conference never said. Anyway, maybe I would have been the president, you can never know. But they bullied me to do that, and I must say that when they are pushing these young people, they do it so well that you would actually understand what is it that needs to be done. That is why I would support the issue that always ask the difficult questions. Let me also take this opportunity, of course, to recognize the board members of NYDA, Mr. Tulisa Ndlela, and also Ms. Pearl Pile, who's also a member of the NPC, the National Planning Commission. I serve with her in that commission as well. Let me also take this opportunity to acknowledge the CEO of NYDA, Mr. Wasim Karim, who was, maybe it's time to go, the CFO when I was still the board member of NYDA a long time ago. But let me just say that we appreciate the work that you are doing with the board of NYDA. Your Excellencies, the Majesties that are here, ladies and gentlemen, the youth of South Africa, the youth of Africa, everyone else that is here. If I've missed someone, please just forgive me with that. As I've already said, when we were still youth, I remember Minister Lamola, the act of, I think it was Act 54, Act 52 of 2008, the NYDA Act that established the NYDA. In 2006, I remember very well, we went to Kimberley as young people, Comrade Chairperson Chefuta. We went to Kimberley to go and discuss the future of the youth. At that particular time, we still had the National Youth Commission and Umsobomvu Youth Fund. However, we believed that not much is being done, or we're not able to achieve a lot through those institutions. It is for that reason then we decided to develop a concept document that then now founded the NYDA. In 2008, Parliament passed the Act, and then now we've got NYDA today, which should then now concentrate more on developmental agenda, more than anything else. And I must say that I'm very proud and pleased to see that you are doing exactly that. Because if you don't move away from just trying to participate as a bank or a financial institution and leave out the developmental agenda, you will leave other people behind. So we are really, really, really proud of the work that you have been doing, because you lived up to what the youth of those days actually wanted to see. I'm honored to address this dialogue on a topic of great importance to the future of our nation, on the intersection of development and democracy. Indeed, we gather here during a critical conjuncture in South Africa's history, where the voices, perspectives, and expertise of youth are critical in shaping our collective future. Now more than ever, the youth of South Africa and the continent must be at the center of strengthening democracy and advancing development. I'm sure that most of our youth here are aware that indeed on the 29th of May, we should, as an elder, now that I'm an elder, I've ended, we should go and vote. You can choose whatever it is that you want to vote for, but me, like Minister Pandor, I'm following her because I want to be like her. She said she will vote for the ANC. I believe that I'll also vote for the ANC. But you've got the right to go and vote for whatever political party whose manifesto you do believe that will serve whatever it is that you want to see. But not only because of that, but because we have seen what they are able to do. There's empirical evidence that whatever it is that they are claiming, at least they can be able to do. So that would be my advice. Last Saturday, on the 27th of April, the world joined South Africa in celebrating and commemorating 30 years of democracy and freedom. During his address at the Union Buildings, President Cyril Ramaphosa shared this in an open quote: "South Africa's democracy is young. Most of the world's most established democracies are over 100 years old. The progress that has been made in a relatively short period of 30 years is something of which we can and should all be proud of. It is only those who willfully will not see, who shut their eyes to progress, who will deny that South Africa today is an infinite better place than it was 30 years ago." And I close quote. Program Director, over the past 30 years, we have been empowered with policy frameworks and plans aimed at advancing development. This includes the Freedom Charter of 1955, the Reconstruction and Development Program, also known as RDP of 1994, the Constitution of Republic of South Africa of 1996, the Growth, Employment and Redistribution, also known as GEA of 1996, the National Development Plan of 2012, and the Medium-Term Strategic Framework under each administration, among several others. The NDP in South Africa is the first plan that provides a long-term perspective on development to eliminate poverty and reduce inequality by 2030. It is the vision that we want to see, or the South Africa that we'd like to live in. The NDP asserts that South Africa can realize these goals by drawing on the energies of its people, growing inclusive economy, building capabilities, enhancing state capacity, and promoting leadership partnership through society. The high-level goals of the NDP are coherent with the key international framework for development, namely the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development that Minister Pandor spoke about, the African Union Agenda of 2063, and the Southern African Development Community Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan that now speaks about plan from 2020 to 2030. Most importantly, the goals are coherent with the aspirations of our people. The NDP, like many other policies and policy frameworks of South African government, aims to leverage the nexus of democracy and development. It is a roadmap for transforming South Africa through a commitment to fostering solidarity, equality, and sustainable development, while committing to our democratic values. South Africa, like many developing democracies, maintain that development and democracy are often intertwined and dependent on each other. Therefore, as we celebrate 20 or 30 years of democracy and freedom, we also celebrate 30 years of development. That has happened in 3 decades, as I've already said, because it's 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, our journey to democracy has not been an easy one, nor the journey to this development. Over the 3 decades, South Africa has faced systematic and contextual challenges that have impacted on our country's developmental trajectory. In 2023, the National Planning Commission released the 10-year review of the National Development Plan. The review reflects on our nation's progress and assesses the key NDP indicators and targets such as poverty, inequality, and unemployment. And of course, when you look at it, you would see that we did well in other areas, but we didn't do so well in other areas, precisely because of some of the challenges that we faced because of COVID-19 and other challenges that the country did face. The NDP set a goal of achieving an annual average of 5.4% GDP growth and aimed to create about 11 million jobs. Over the past 30 years, the South African economy has grown, and it is expected to be Africa's largest economy in 2024, according to the International Monetary Fund. Our labor force expanded from 11.3 in 1994, and you must listen carefully, to 28.3 million in 2023. So it has more than doubled from what we had inherited. Due to the progressive labor legislation, the race, gender, and age and skills composition of our labor force and the employment have altered considerably, promoting more inclusive economic development. Infrastructure development is a pivotal driver of growth and development in South Africa and the continent. South Africa continues to affirm its support for the Presidential Infrastructure Championing Initiative as a member state alongside 11 other African countries. The main goal of this PICI is to ignite and sustain catalytic collaborative partnerships among member states, countries towards the realization of an integrated continent through transboundary infrastructure development. This is key to ensuring the operationalization of what Minister Spando spoke about, the African Continental Free Trade Area. Through PICI, member states commit to promoting the empowerment of the most vulnerable groups, namely women, youth, and people with disabilities across Africa. South Africa's demographic landscape reflects a significant youth bulge, like the previous speakers have spoken, with a population aged 25 to 39, representing potential economic drivers. Balancing this demographic potential with education and employment, as well as opportunities, is very crucial. The government, through democratic institutions, seeks to create an enabling environment for economic growth by addressing obstacles to transformation, innovation, competition, and development. Yesterday, we did attend an event with, I think it's the F-Shot, that was hosted by the British High Commission. And it was so wonderful to really listen to what they are trying to do when you talk about innovation and entrepreneurship. Because if you can't sustain it, then it doesn't really fall under what we are trying to achieve. So once you talk about development, you must talk about something that is sustainable. And I'm really hoping that we will invest a lot and try to do as much as we can, especially as young people, looking at these opportunities that are not necessarily within the areas that we are used to, and also that can be able to represent the jobs of the future. Because once you start talking about climate change, you really have to now start thinking outside the box to ask yourself, what is it that can I do? What is happening in my locality, and how do I then now become innovative? There's a young woman from Kenya who actually lived in the squatter camps of Kenya, the largest one. And she then now decided that she is going to do a research, because she says that when she became a mother at a very young age, so her shack did burn. So she decided to then now go and ask, how do I then now have a stove that would not necessarily catch fire so easily? She made a research, she was able to do that. Then now the things like phobes and the as short, has also recognized her. And this has then now showed that we can really do much with the little bit that we have. I think that is why those that are politicians would then now quote people like Karl Marx to say that your material condition will always dictate your consciousness. So that really, really impressed me. We are yet fully to explore the potential of small and medium enterprises in driving innovation, inclusion, and transformation. The NDP states that our SMMEs should create 90% of all the jobs that we need to have by 2030, the 11 million one that we have spoken about. Therefore, we applaud agencies such as the NYDA for their continued work in ensuring the youth-led SMME becomes equal contributors in growing our economy through providing grants, capacity building, and upskilling opportunities for those. We just saw the video that we just looked at here. That young woman is now on a global space. She's not just going to sell her products here, but she's known all over the world. That is all because of NYD, and I think we need to clap for them because they did very well. At least there is empirical evidence on that. This includes Arieng, Brazil, an agricultural summer school, an initiative led by our very own Deputy Chair, Karabo Mohale, aimed to inspire and empower young people to become leaders and change agents in South Africa's agricultural sector. Some people do say that in the future, the billionaires of the future will be in the agricultural sector and food security in particular. So this is a very good initiative, an investment that will definitely yield fruits that we need for future jobs. And of course, current jobs. The country is moving towards universal access to education at all levels and improved overall educational outcomes. Am I still fine? I'm almost done. More individuals aged 20 and older have attained grade 12 as their highest level of education, rising from 16% in 1996 to 38% in 2022. Of course, a lot still has to be done, but we must say that we have come a long way. We have done well. In 2002, there was about 295 special schools for learners with disabilities. By 2022, we now have 489 schools of people with disabilities, and 435 of that are public schools and 54 being independent. So the governing party is still doing a very good job as it relates to this. The matric pass rate improved from 82.9% in 2023 from 53.4% in 1995. Enrollment in public universities have more than doubled, steadily edging closer to the NDP target of 1.6 million enrollment by 2030. So you've got a lot of work to do. Access to higher education has been bolstered by the establishment of more institutions of higher learning and increased National Student Financial Aid Scheme, also known as NSFAS. Therefore, government has taken steps to address the youth unemployment challenge. The presidential employment stimulus has also assisted in creating more than 1.7 million work and livelihood opportunities. Your Excellencies, our youth are resilient, resourceful, and brimming with untapped potential. Across the nation, young people are leading grassroots movements, driving innovation and advocating for change. Their energy, creativity, and passion are driving force behind our collective aspiration for a brighter future. As we chart the path forward, we must heed the voices of our youth and harness their potential as agents of change. Building on the lessons learned from the 10-year review of the NDP and the upcoming launch of our 30-year review of South African democracy, we must redouble our efforts to create an enabling environment that empowers and uplifts our young people. To achieve the goal of the goals of NDP, we require more than a state-centric approach to planning and implementation. I think Tulani also spoke about that. It requires a comprehensive, coordinated, and partnership approach of development that should also include active citizenry, and that's where you come in. As I conclude, Program Director, the NDP affirms the future of our nation lies in the hands of our youth. We are fast approaching 2030 deadline, and we need the youth of South Africa to lead in asking what's next. How does the youth build on the existing progress made in improving livelihoods of our people? What strategies can the youth consider to strengthen institutions and systems we have developed? How does the youth leverage on South Africa's growing international influence? And we just, of course, celebrated what Minister Pando has actually been doing all over the world. And how do we then now drive forward domestic imperatives? What key reforms are needed to ensure our country's economic growth is inclusive, transformative, and redistributive? How can we be able to recalibrate our planning systems so that we can better serve our country? I believe that the youth of South Africa and Africa as a whole are in a better position to answer these questions. And in the words of Antin Limbede, one of the founding members of the African National Congress Youth League, I will say the hour of the youth has struck. Thank you very much.
Thank you kindly, Honourable Minister. Advancements are indeed taking place and would truly be lying if we said that nothing has happened in this country in the last 30 years. We're going to be taking a quick tea break. When you start hearing a song, it means it's time to come back. So please stand up, stretch, go grab some tea, and then we'll proceed with today's program. Enjoy. May all the dignitaries kindly follow Karabo Mohale to the VIP suite for your tea.
Freedom is coming tomorrow. Get ready, glorious freedom. Freedom is coming tomorrow.
Yeah, 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 yeah. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2. Yeah, yeah. 1, 2. 1, 1. 1, 1, 2, 2. Yeah, yeah. 1, 1. This one.
Yes, sir. No. Yeah. It's now 6 o'clock. Two. Check 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. It's too sensitive. 1, 2. Which one is it? Which one is it? 1, 2. 1. Yeah. It's this one. 1, 2. 1, 2. Just a bit. 1, 2. Give me a feeder. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Where are you putting? Left and right. 1, 2. Put it elevated. Setting for the 1, 2. Put it more there. Put it more on the all the way. 1. And let it again. Push it all the way. 1, 2. 1, 2. 2. Give us a bit. 1, 2. Check 1, 2. Mic check 1, 2. 1, 2. Get down. Press down. High pass filter. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1. Check 1, 2. 1, 2, 2. Still 1, 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Please check 1, 2. 1, 2.
Now stop. Stop right there. This is an illegal gathering. I'm giving you 3 minutes to disperse. Go home. Go home. I'm warning you. I'm warning you. What's it taking to school?
Hey, Twitter! I want an IDP right now. Bloody chaos, Lieutenant! Tell Flum to get the rooms ready.
Shut up! Safasa pelisizo simnyama. Wasafa isizo saba mzulama. Anijani ngo kelize tusisilamu lele ungalutawa. Isizo simnyama. Wasafa isizo saba mzulama. Anijani ngo kelize tusisilamu lele ungalutawa. Isizo simnyama. Wasafa isizo saba mzulama. Anijani ngo kelize tusisilamu lele ungalutawa.
They took me to a prison and they beat me. When I cried, they put a baby's gum in my mouth so I wouldn't cry. Then they covered my head with a wet sack and gave me the electricity. I cried like a little baby, holding the gum in my mouth.
He took me to a room full of dead bodies. He said he would leave me with them. I began to cry. He took my face and turned it to the light. And he laughed. And he said, "Look, your eyes are piercing."
He shouted my name. He pointed at me. "Come to me, boy." I was so afraid I couldn't speak. I walked slowly towards him. When I was close, he hit me hard here. It hurt so much. I screamed and fell to the ground. He pointed at me again. "Come to me, boy." I was still crying. I knew he would hit me again. I put my hands here so it wouldn't hurt so bad. But he hit me again. It hurt so bad. I couldn't cry anymore.
There were many of us, all from my school. They took us to a big room. They told us to take off our clothes, all our clothes. They told us to lie down on the floor.
Then many police came in. They whipped us with stumbles until we bled. When they were tired, more police came in. They whipped us again, and we bled more.
This time is called the state of emergency, 1986. 80,000 children in the prisons. They hurt us to make us fear them. We fear them, but we do not forget. We are still children. We are young and full of fear. But every day we grow older. Every day we grow stronger. We do not forget.
Again. That's enough, Sergeant. Again.
She's going to sit tight.
This is your last warning. Clear the area immediately. Disperse now. Clear the area. Disperse
They fear you because you are young. They fear you because you are the future. How fearful they must be that they shoot you, children. How powerful you must be that they fear you so much. You are powerful because you are the generation that will be free. The violence, the beatings, the torture, the killings, all this is the birth pain of our free nation. Please, God, may I live to see it. But if I don't, I see it now on your faces, like the light of the rising sun, and my heart leaps within me as if I too was young again. And I know, oh yes, I know, freedom is coming tomorrow. Amanda! Amanda! My the Africa! May our children rest in peace. ashes to ashes, dust to dust. They fear you because you are young. They fear you because you are the future. How fearful they must be that they shoot you, children. How powerful you must be that they fear you so much. You are powerful because you are the generation that will be free. The violence, the beatings, the torture, the killings, all this is the birth pain of our free nation. Please, God, may I live to see it. But if I don't, I see it now on your faces, like the light of the rising sun, and my heart leaps within me as if I too was young again. And I know, oh yes, I know, freedom is coming tomorrow. Amanda! Amanda! Maibuye! The Africa! May our children rest in peace. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
This is your last warning. Clear the area immediately. Disperse now. Clear the area. Disperse
They took me to a prison and they beat me. When I cried, they put a baby's gum in my mouth so I wouldn't cry. Then they covered my head with a wet sack and gave me the electricity. I cried like a little.
Sholoza Zimbem bam bam zimbem bam Sabi Zibebe bam bam zibebe bam Sabi Zibebe bam bam zibebe bam Sabi Zibebe bam bam zibebe Sabi Zibebe bam bam zibebe Zibebe bam Sabi Zibebe bam bam zibebe Zibebe bam Sabi bam Zibebe bam bam zibebe Zibebe bam Sabi Zibebe bam bam zibebe Zibebe bam Sabi Zibebe bam bam zibebe Zibebe bam Sabi bebe Zibebe bam bam zibebe Zibebe bam Sabi Zibebe bam bam zibebe Zibebe Sabi Zibebe bam bam zibebe Zibebe bam Sabi Zibebe bam bam zibebe Zibebe bam Sabi bebe Zibebe bam bam zibebe Zibebe bam Sabi bebe Zibebe bam bam zibebe bam Sabi Zibebe bam bam zibebe Sabi bam zibebe Zibebe Sabi Zibebe bam zibebe Zibebe Sabi Zibebe bam bam zibebe Africa.
It's the vibrant Soweto Gospel Choir, an indication that tea has come to an end. If you're outside, please make your way back in. They will perform one more item before we get into the next item on our program. Choir, take it away.
Here nothing more.
Surely we can do better than that. A huge round of applause for the Soweto Gospel Choir. Oh, they got us nice and activated. Thank you so much, guys. We'll hopefully see you soon. Welcome back from tea, everybody. I have to apologize to Eswatini. They came to me during tea and said that they wanted to greet us in their language, and I never gave them an opportunity. So if you're from Eswatini, hello. I hope you're well. So it's time for us to get back into a panel discussion for the NDP panel as well as APRM country review. Our moderator is Prof. Musawenkosi Sambore, who says that we also need to take introspection and have a reality check at ourselves. What is it that we're always doing? Because it's always easy to point fingers at the government for all our woes. To discuss this and more, please help me welcome Prof. And she'll also introduce the panel that she'll be discussing this very important topic with. A round of applause for her, please.
A very good afternoon to everyone and welcome back from tea. I would like to start by introducing the panelists. As already indicated earlier on, their elaborate and illustrious bios are in the booklets in front of you, and so I will not go too in depth into them. I will start by introducing Ms. Lerato, who will be one of the panel members. I'm actually just going to use my phone because I have them in order here. So Ms. Lerato Mataboge is the Deputy Director General of Trade, Industry, and Competition in South Africa. She is currently, prior to this role, she founded and headed Trade and Investment in Africa, among the illustrious other things that she does. Please have a look at the bio, the full bio in the booklet. A round of applause for our panelist, Ms. Mataboge. All right, she said that she will come forward once I'm done. I would next like to introduce our panelist, Khosi of Babong Bamogale II, Royal Nation. Of course, his title should give you an indication of who he is, and you can read the rest in the booklet. A round of applause for him, please. Our next panelist is Ms. Pearl Pillay. She's a youth development practitioner and is currently the managing director of Youth Lab, a national youth think tank that aims to mainstream youth participation in community development and policy making. A round of applause for her. Thank you. Our next panelist is Ms. Yolokazi Mfuto. She is a youth holistic development enthusiast who is passionate about the struggle against socioeconomic, political, and health challenges that affect young people. A round of applause for her. Finally, last but not least, we have Mr. Stephen, sorry if I butcher your surname, Grutz, who's the head of the African Governance and Diplomacy Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs in Johannesburg. A round of applause for him. Thank you very much. And I would just like to, if you would allow me, ride on the already established protocols as we need to delve right into our discussion. Please give them once again a big round of applause. Am I audible? All right. Okay, so we have here our esteemed panelist with whom we will be discussing the APRM review and having a look into some of the insights that were shared with Undate Tulani Chefuta concerning the review. We will also touch on some of the key aspects that were also indicated or highlighted by some of our previous esteemed speakers. So I'll go right into it. And Madame Lerato, I would like to pose this question to you. What are the key interventions done by government to drive trade and investments in South Africa?
Thank you very much. Thank you for that question. And let me also stand on protocol and acknowledge the Honorable Minister and distinguished guests. There are many, many interventions that we're busy with to foster trade and investment. But as a start, I need to emphasize that we are at the cusp of a very revolutionary project called the AFCFTA, African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. And as a government, we are putting a lot of resources now behind making sure that that is a success. Yes, as Minister Pando indicated, we maintain our relationships with other countries. We're busy as well with AGOA. We're advocating in the BRICS for trade and investment, but there is a revolutionary opportunity, not just for the country as a whole, but for young people in the Continental Free Trade Agreement. And what we are looking to do is to make sure that as we industrialize South Africa, to be able to service the demands of the African continent. There are huge opportunities that have been uncovered, just 4 sectors alone. If I have to advise any young person to say, what sector can you invest in so that you can take advantage of the CFTA? For example, the automotive sector. In the automotive sector, there are opportunities that we've uncovered. This industry is growing by $42 billion per annum. That means that there's huge demand for automotives and components on the continent. Now, the question is, where are the companies that are homegrown African companies that are going to supply? And we want it to be African. We want to support South African companies who want proudly African-made automotive components, as an example. A second one is agriculture. Our continent is importing $90 million every year in food. We buy food from outside of the continent. Now, that's a huge opportunity when we've got a CFTA to say, how do we then begin to, make sure that we produce what we consume, and that we also export that to the rest of the world? So our focus as well is that how do we strengthen the value chain, create agricultural entrepreneurs in South Africa and in the rest of the African continent. There's also huge opportunity in pharmaceuticals, for example, vaccine manufacturing, etc., and of course, transport and logistics. So that's just an example of where concrete opportunities lie that we need to take advantage of and exploit, not just as South Africa, but as the African continent as a whole.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Lerato. I love what you touch on about homegrown and in-house initiatives, because as Chief Charumbira mentioned earlier on about how China does it, that is something we could really learn, and I would like to commend you for that it really appears that we are on the right track in that regard. Jose Mokale, the next question is directed to you. The role of traditional leaders can never be understated or underestimated. How important is it, in your perspective, for traditional leaders to play an active role in contributing towards building an inclusive country and society?
I'd like to say thank you. Medise also, our honorable ministers, honorable chairperson of PAP, president of PAP, everybody else, all protocol observed. Traditional leadership is very important, to a point whereby most of our people come from traditional leadership. When you look at our young people, what they see is what the urban life can provide for them. And then they forget that you come from a traditional place, traditional community, to a point whereby now they see that it's not always rosy in the urban areas. We want to come back home. What do traditional leaders have that is very key? It's the land. You optimize that factor, that we have land, that we can work on it agriculturally. We can work on it in terms of industries like manufacturing. That can be a key role into growing our young people to say, look, I may not have the opportunity elsewhere. I went to varsity and college to learn. I can come back to my home and upgrade the communities there. So to answer your question, it is vital, because our people are looking up to us to say, look, we are in a very dire place. Can you raise us up economically. And then our young people who go to study, they go there to say, look, I want to study so that I can bring it back at home. Our honorable president here, when he opened, he said, don't look down on your country. You can even say, don't look down on where you come from. That way you will say, look, I want to grow my community. I want to be proud of my community. I want to be proud of where I come from. And I think that is where the opportunity when it comes to growing our young people to say we can open our minds to say that we don't have to go to the urban areas. We can come to traditional leaders. And then we can also say, look, we have land. We have the opportunity to go and meet our honorable ministers to say, look, come and invest. We can go to opportunities like big private business. Come and invest. Come and talk to us and see how we can alleviate poverty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kosi. I don't know if it's safe to say that some of our young people here who may be interested in agriculture can have a conversation with you also, if you are able to connect them to the right people who will provide them with that land so they can make the most of it. So as we develop the country further. Ms. Pearl Pillay, this one is directed to you. As a commissioner of the National Planning Commission, what are some of the key takeaways from the review of the NDP that you would like to share with us today?
We really decided to put me on the spot today.
Sorry.
This can only be secretary. So it is. Sabotage comes in many forms. Thank you for that very on-the-spot question. I think what the NDP review has shown us, and both at the Planning Commission and I think as civil society actors, as political actors, is that we have a very, very long way to go. And one of the difficulties of future planning is that you can sit in 2012, which is when they sat and wrote the National Development Plan, and tried to plan for 18 years ahead, but had no idea what the world was going to look like in 18 years. So what does a national development plan that has not taken into consideration COVID-19 look like, right? And I think that's kind of the difficulty with long-term planning and policymaking, is that you live in a changing world, and often I think the policies that we create are not always very responsive. No one could have seen a pandemic coming, so I lay no blame at the Planning Commission's feet. But I think what this review showed us was that we need to figure out what development planning that is more responsive looks like. We need to figure out development planning that is youth-centered. So one of the biggest criticisms of the National Development Plan, it's a view that I hold myself, is for a country where the majority of the demographic is young, the plan doesn't mention young people in very intensive ways. So if you were to look through the National Development Plan, and I like asking this question because the answer is never surprising, how many people in the room have read the National Development Plan? If you're not South African, congratulations, you're exempt from this question. Right, so less than half the room. It's a 456-page document. It's incredibly difficult to read, right? But if you look through the entirety of that document and you look at all of the interventions that actually mention youth and you wrote them down on a bulleted list, you wouldn't fill 2 pages out of an almost 500-page document. And so there's a disjuncture between how we're planning for development and how that development planning reflects what our country looks like. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that we've gotten from this review process, is that when you do development planning that doesn't center your most key demographic, you sit and we're here 6 years before our 2030 target. We're not close to meeting any of the targets in the National Development Plan. And part of it is because we've not created a plan that is youth-centered. And we talk about things like, we say cross-cutting issues, right? If we had 10 Rand for every time someone said cross-cutting issues, we would not have a student funding crisis, I think, in South Africa. But one of the biggest, I think, issues around specifically youth planning, is that we say cross-cutting issues, and what it means is that if everything is a youth issue, then nothing is a youth issue, right? And we sit and we say, oh, education, of course education is a youth issue, but we're not thinking about what it means for a young person to move through the education system in South Africa and what a responsive education system looks like. So I think in this review process, there's been a lot of hard lessons learned about who you're planning for, but most importantly, I think who are the people doing the planning. So if we think about especially the NDP process back in 2012, young people were left out of that conversation entirely, right? The word on the street, don't hold me to this. If you guys say that I said this, I'm going to deny it. But there was one person that was meant to be a youth representative in that process. That person then left the process and that position was then not filled. And so there was a giant voice, which I think is, and I'm obviously biased, but I think was the most important voice that was completely left out of the process. And we pushed ahead. We're now 12 years into the plan and young people cannot locate themselves in the country's development goals. And so I think for us, that's probably been some of the biggest lessons to learn, is that you need to create development planning that centers around the people who are meant to benefit from that development, but also sees those people as drivers of that development. And I think we've really kind of missed the boat in that. Fortunately, 2030 is almost upon us, and hopefully we'll have a new national development plan that is more responsive and more inclusive, and can actually place young people at the center of our development, not as a kind of side thought.
We've got another one. Thank you very much, Ms. Pearl, for those insights. And I think it really resonates well with what one of the previous speakers reiterated, that slogan of youth, that nothing for us without us, right? So it's very important that we start to see an NDP which reflects more what, is the essence of inclusivity for young people, and with young people, obviously, at the epicenter of driving those initiatives as well. Ms. Yolokazi, you're an activist and have been participating in the diplomatic space. How important is it for there to be conducive spaces for the integration of young people?
Thank you so much for that question. Can you hear me? Yes. Good morning, everyone. Well, if we're going to speak about young people, I always speak against leaks, saying that we should not be relegated to our own spaces, and for young people to have their own conversations on their own time. And today I'm quite grateful that we have the ministers and even the president of PAP listening to this conversation. They don't just come in, deliver messages and leave the room. So they are part of the conversation when young people discuss issues that affect them, that affect society. Because it's one thing that we can say young people are 60%, 70% of the population, but definitely the young people who are here today, they're 100% of the future. So it becomes very vital that young people are not just integrated into the conversation, but the conversation becomes futuristic, that you are in charge of this path. And it becomes important that we listen to the voices without filter. Two, you see those young people. You don't reserve important positions for people who you deem as old, and assuming that age is equal to maturity and intellectual capacity. So it's important that you afford the space for young people to contribute to the discussions. And I was part of the review in 2020, where we gathered as young people on social media because of the height of COVID-19. And young people were quite vocal about the state of our country. And some of them said the NDP is not just a plan. It's not a plan. It's a dream. So it's important that we have tangible actionables that are going to actually advise the government to say, this is what must happen, not just to say we want a dream, we want to see 50,000 jobs created. How? So young people were putting those views forward in 2020. 2021, I presented the submission to the NGC, and the NGC was quite surprised that young people came up with these suggestions, which are tangible, right? And then later on, when we're presenting in Kenya, the rest of the African population of young people were quite surprised that South African government in particular, was able to listen to the voices of young people and saying this is a progress and a great step great step in your English. Wow, this is the second. Yes, so it's a step in the right direction, because as much as we can complain and say young people are not involved, but when they are involved, they make sure they take the space and ensure that their mark is left. So it's very important, and I always want to plead with young people that whenever we get the space, be it political participation, and you're leading young people there, let us not waste our opportunities, because when you represent young people, you are responsible for the next person who's going to come into that position. Because if you mess up when you get to the position, you misuse your power or anything like that, the next person who's going to come with that cloud that we've had a young person in this position. What did they do with that opportunity? So whenever we lead, we ensure that we are leading knowing that we are leaving a legacy and other people should not suffer. They should not go through the struggles. This conversation must not happen in the next 10 years, because the space would be conducive enough, favorable enough for young people to just come in, have a conversation without being scared that they're going to be judged. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yolokazi, for that insightful contribution. My next question is directed at Mr. Stephen. What would you say is the essence of the second generation country review? What are some of the key takeaways that you would like to share with us this afternoon?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Okay. So I wear three hats. I wear a hat as an analyst. I have been privileged enough to be studying the APRM for all 20 years of its existence. I've also been very privileged to travel our beautiful continent and have been to 30 different countries in Africa that are somehow involved in the APRM. And I think for South Africa, where it all starts, and I'll just get my prop here, is the first country review report, which came out in 2007. Not as big as the National Development Plan, only 380 pages. But I think that's far more than anybody is ever going to read. And I just want to mention the cross-cutting issues that were mentioned in that first report all those years ago. Just close your eyes and think whether these are still issues today. Unemployment, capacity constraints and poor service delivery, poverty and inequality, land reform, violence against women, violence against children, HIV and AIDS pandemic, corruption, crime, racism and xenophobia. This was 15 years ago. The second review really emphasizes how structural and difficult these problems are to solve. But what's interesting is that the new review, which of this is just a very small part, only has three cross-cutting issues. And those are gender-based violence, corruption, and implementation of policies. So I think the review is an opportunity to look in the mirror, and it's not always easy to look in the mirror. And we can't solve problems unless we can name them and describe them and understand them. And so the work that we did with, as SIA, as the South African Institute of International Affairs, we worked with young people all around the country, all 9 provinces. As Yolo says, it was all online because of COVID. And a big thank you to the National Governing Council and to Tulani for being so open to receiving the youth submission and to incorporating those issues into the national report. So I think also one of the problems, and it's not unique to South Africa, is like the NDP, the APRM tends to disappear. It isn't well anchored and joined to other processes. To the NDP itself, I don't think the relations are as good as they should be. To budgets, you know, people say, how are we going to implement this? Where is it in the budget? And it doesn't appear in the budget. We also have a tendency, like many countries, to say, oh, we have a program for that. We have a policy. We have a project, without really taking a step back and saying, is that actually working? Do we have the right legislation? Do we have the right regulations? And the last thing I'll say in this opening remark is that when we actually do change something that the APRM told us to change, so in this first review, one of the things that the review said was that floor crossing in Parliament doesn't really work in a proportional representation system that we have. And in fact, South Africa went and abolished floor crossing, but nobody ever went back to say this was one of the APRM suggestions. Another one is political party funding. That was a big issue in the first review, and I think it remains a big issue now. But nobody ever said when the legislation came in 3 or 4 years ago, the APRM was one of the organizations that recommended it. So the connections between policy entities is not as good as it should be. So I think the report is honest, it is wide-ranging, and I think it should be standard reading for all of us. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stephen. Yes, please do give our panelists a big round of applause for those insights they have shared. At this juncture, I would like to open it up to the floor, and I will allow 2 questions directed to any panelist of your choice. Unfortunately, we would have loved to ask more questions, but I'm managing time here. So I see there's a hand there. Is there a second hand anywhere? Second hand at the back. Please assist us with the microphones. We will start with the lady here in the front. Please.
Yeah, thank you so much, panelists. Indeed, my name is Kiro Sichongwe. I'm coming from Zambia. I've got a question to, I need to stand up. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kiro Sichongwe. I'm coming from Zambia. I'm delighted to be here. A quick question to the first 2 panelists there who talked about agriculture. Of course, agriculture on the continent has got the potential to create jobs as well as reduce poverty. But my concern is that the youths, they are not so much attracted to the culture of agriculture or to the field of agriculture. I don't know what can be done in order to make them attracted to agriculture as compared to waiting for white-collar jobs. And I think once they are attracted to agriculture, they are able to make use of the land or agriculture, then most of the problem that we have in terms of joblessness, I think they can be addressed to some certain extent. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity. My question is directed, my name is Councillor Zingisam Kauli, and the government does actually give opportunities to young people. I am a 32-year-old executive mayor in one of the municipalities in the Free State. I just want to direct this question to Usisi Lerato Paya in terms of industries. I want to understand, you spoke about agriculture, and we know that agriculture plays a very big role in an economy. To actually build an economy, you must have a base. So where I come from in my municipality, we are exploring the hemp industry. We have actually partnered with someone, we have gave them land, but I just want to understand the department. How is it going? How can it support the project? Because we are 40 kilometers away from the Lesotho border and 30 kilometers away from the Eastern Cape border. So it actually has a very big potential of growing. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the members of the audience who've asked the questions. Please allow me to direct the first question to Hosi and the second question to Melerato.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Our young people right now, all they want is an income for their families, for themselves. Now, when you come to them and say to them, listen, there's an opportunity here that is intergenerational, whereby you grow food, not just for yourselves, but also for the country. You change the mindset of saying to them, listen, you cannot just go and look for a job and earn a salary. You have to sit down and say, I want to be my own boss. In my community, what I do is I tell them, do not expect to be paid on the first day, on the second, and on the third month. Expect to say, I am going to plant and I'm going to reap my rewards at the end of the season. With that reward, it's supposed to last me until the following season. What we have done is that we have looked for partnership with government. In our country, we have what you call National Skills Fund, whereby we say to National Skills Fund, please fund our young people. Please train them to be able to be self-sufficient, self-sustaining, feed yourselves. Because that's the problem that we have with our young people. They see influences and then they say, this is the life I want to live. They don't see that you have to work hard, very hard for some of us to get to that level. Others have been working for years and still not there yet. They want instant, like microwave, instant everything, instant coffee, instant food. Unfortunately, in the life that we live in, the economy that we live in, we cannot sustain that. I think that's one thing that we must know that we need to change. So we start at grassroots levels. We start with the primary school kids. We go to the high school kids. We tell them, you can be what you want to be, but you have to work hard. In terms of agriculture, for me, I think it's the life of any country. The economic well-being. If you look at that and say, I want better, I want more, agriculture is a very strong way of doing it. And then that's why we have institutions like the National Skills Fund to say, okay, look, we will train you for 12 months. After the training, then we will also partner with big business to say, let's have an off-take agreement. That way, we will have our young people growing and learning from even the industry's finest, where they can provide for your Woolworths, your Pick and Pays, and your Checkers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khosi Mohale. Over to you, Melerato.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Khosi. So let me just pick up from the point that Khosi made in meandering my way to answering your question. In 2022, I believe, 2020, it's not a long time ago, the World Bank did a study and they compared upper middle income countries in assessing levels of self-employment. So South Africa was compared with Turkey, India, Brazil, etc., to look at the levels of self-employment. South Africa literally was lagging at the bottom at 10% self-employment rates, compared to 30% in Mexico, 30 plus in Turkey, etc. So our problem is bigger than just where are the opportunities. I think it's a mindset issue that everybody's looking for a job, but who's going to create the job, right? We need to inculcate a culture of entrepreneurship because entrepreneurs are going to generate more jobs. And our role as government is to be the enabler of opportunities, open up and use our regulatory muscle, where possible financial as well, to open up opportunities. So we need to go back to the very basics around how we create a mindset of entrepreneurship in South Africa. Because our comparator countries, the reason why they're growing faster than we are, I would hazard is part of it is also the fact that, you know, they've got much more of an entrepreneurial approach to taking up opportunities. So that could possibly be one of the issues to look at. Now, if you will allow me, Chairperson, I think I'd be remiss if I don't break down the further opportunities. And I'm glad that you picked up on agriculture, but there are others. The four that I mentioned. Please, Melerato. So I'm going to be so quick, very quick. Because I need our audience to at least think about how they position themselves to take advantage of these opportunities, because other countries will take advantage of CFTA and Africans will still be left behind. And I think that is the challenge that we're grappling with at the moment. I mentioned the demand for motor vehicles, 2.4 motor vehicles, cars every year that have to be bought on the continent. We import them, most of them, 300,000 commercial vehicles. Big opportunities there. Electric vehicles, battery manufacturing, those are other opportunities that should be thought of. I said 90 million, that was a mistake, it's 90 billion that we import in food on the continent. So we need to change that. And beyond just being a farmer, there are opportunities as well in the technology around agriculture. Who's making the irrigation systems? There's a whole value chain of opportunities that we need to think about. 800% growth in fertilizer supply, right? And all of it we're importing, or at least majority of it we're importing. So that is where, when we need to spend time breaking down value chains for each other so that young people can understand that when you go and open a business, think about where your future opportunity lies. And the continent absolutely is one of them. Pharmaceuticals as well, we mentioned. Packaged medicines, the big opportunity. Vaccine manufacturing that we spoke about. Also healthcare infrastructure in itself. The continent has a deficit of infrastructure, including South Africa to a degree. Health clinics, hospitals, the construction, that's a whole chain of opportunity insofar as the construction industry to provide for healthcare. And the last one, transport and logistics. We are growing, 2 million trucks are needed now, 100,000 rail wagons are needed. We're gonna need 250 aircrafts just to connect the continent and to enable us to trade by air, as it were, by 2030, including shipping vessels. I say this because African youth are the ones that need to be at the forefront of supplying and creating opportunities here. Insofar as transport and logistics, e-commerce is a big one. So as we increasingly buying online, who's actually moving the product around? So how do we create many more logistics and e-commerce opportunities? So those are just a few that we've quantified out of the AFCFTA. We can do the same with the BRICS, with AGOA, etc. To say that opportunities are there, I think our youth, young people, need to also put a lot of pressure as well on the rest of us if we are not enabling as quickly as we should. But I can guarantee you that opportunities have been opened up. A youth and women protocol under the CFTA was signed and launched in February 2024. And I'm sure many people in the room have not read that, because we've got the most youth and women responsive trade agreement in the world in the CFTA. There's no other trade agreement that has got a protocol that speaks to women and to the youth directly and specifically. So I encourage that we don't lose that opportunity, that the CFTA becomes an African solution instead of the rest of the world seeing the opportunity and taking advantage of it. And we still remain the consumers for the rest of our days, as it were. So thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'd like to submit those remarks from the both of you, Jose Mohale and yourself, Melerato, as your closing remarks. So thank you very much for those insights. I would just like to give the other three panelists 30 seconds to address some of what was touched in the last two speeches before we went for the tea break, and particularly pertaining to the remarks around how South Africa is still relatively a young democracy, only after 3 decades, that is 30 years. What is it that you would like to see in the next 20 plus years happening as South Africa continues to mature in her democracy? And where would you like to position the youth on that trajectory of democratic maturity? 30 seconds each, please.
Okay. So I think for me, the next 20 years should really be a consideration about what does an alternative democracy look like. I think globally we're seeing that what democracy has done is created lots of political elites, and especially young people bear the brunt of kind of not being at that table, right? And that doesn't mean democracy is bad. It doesn't mean anything about the quality of a vote or a public political process. But what it does mean is that we have an opportunity to rethink what democracy means for us as young people. We go into elections this month or next month, and it's an important moment because I think it really shows us the amount of power young people in South Africa have. If every single registered or eligible young person or so under the age of 35 voted for the same party, that party would win by a landslide, right? Young South Africans are democracy. And I think we've created this really weird system where we see democracy as this unchanging thing, that this is how the system is and you either fit in or you're going to be excluded. And so I think we have an opportunity to create the kind of democracy that we want. And the way we do that is through, I think, really intentional youth collaboration, but also understanding that it's not a situation where young people have to wait for their turn. It's also not a situation where older people have to leave. There's value in a relationship that is about work and is about progress. And if we can figure out how to make that work without seeing young people as threats or old people as gatekeepers, then I think we can redefine what our democracy can do for us.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Ms. Yolokazi.
Thank you so much. Well, riding on Paul's point on democracy, I want to urge all young people not to actually flirt with the idea that, I see on social media that some people are flirting with the idea that autocracy might be better than democracy, particularly South Africans. And it's injustice for the people who fought for this liberation and the foods that we are eating today. So it's important that we safeguard and protect our democracy, and you don't safeguard it by sitting just at home. It's important that those who are in academia, you're right to produce work on democracy, to share good stories about democracy, and also ensure that you participate. Unfortunately, democracy is a contact sport. If you don't participate, then your views are not registered. So it's important that you participate, one, in the elections for South Africans who are going for elections in 29 May, but also more than 70 countries are going on elections across the globe. So it's important that in your various countries, you also participate. And on development, I would like in the next 20 years to maybe we change how we look at development and how we define development, because it also have to be Afrocentric. Because sometimes development is seen as a Western concept. People come and say, this is development. But development has been what we've been living for the many years. So if in a particular rural area, they still enjoy the work that is being done by traditional leadership, let us not necessarily speak against traditional leadership and also put them on the side. Let's do development the way people want development to be done. And if we are not going to do that, then the next maybe 20 years, we'll still be having the same conversations on no young people are not included and. And if we involve young people and people in their own spaces and their communities and in their own languages, even culture will be protected, because language bears culture as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Over to you, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you so much. I'll just highlight two issues that also came up in the South African APRM report and also the submission done by youth. The first one is education. If we don't get education right from early childhood development, primary, high school, tertiary, we're going to have another lost generation. And we're never going to get the skills that the economy needs. We're never going to get people's lives improve. It's been shown that if one person goes to university, how that family is pulled out of poverty. And if we don't really take education seriously, and it's not for lack of budget, it's one of the departments that gets the most, but something somewhere is just not working. And the other is, I think we need to have a society that is accountable, that there are consequences for wrongdoing, that everybody is treated equally before the law, and that there's a respect for institutions. I think one of the things that the APRM showed in South Africa is there's been such a lack of trust in institutions, from parliament to government, to the police, to the judiciary, to civil society organizations. We're losing trust in our institutions that we've built so hard over the last 30 years, and we need to regain that in the next 30 years.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stephen. Please do give our panelists a huge round of applause. Thank you very much. Allow me to just give my 30 seconds closing remarks in saying that I believe it's very important that as young people, we do our part. And Melerato mentioned it, hinted to this, that it's not everyone who will get a job. Some of us have to create those jobs. And so it's very important that we do not fit the characteristic that our elders sometimes ascribe to us, that we are entitled. It's important that we recognize that we also have a responsibility to play our role and do our part as best we can. Thank you very much for your audience. Sorry we couldn't take any further questions.
Thank you so much, Prof. Musawenkosi and your esteemed panel. There seems to be an echo in sound. If there's anybody who's streaming what's happening right now, can you please switch the sound off? Because there's a huge echo coming from the conversations that are taking place on stage. But so much coming out of that conversation. I mean, I think, again, we could have spent the whole day, you know, from us being an instant gratification generation to agriculture being at the forefront to really looking at language and the culture that it carries and just so, so much more. But next up, I would like to call up on stage Deputy Minister, Honorable Emma Kantima Hamas, to talk about viable economic pathways for young people on the African continent. She says that the possibility of opportunities are many if we, young and old, combine our wisdom and experience of the elders with the potential energy of the youth. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Dr. Emma Kantima Hamas, please make your way on stage.
Sure. Thank you very much, the program director. You are doing a brilliant job. This is what happens when you put youth to be in charge of programs. I think she deserves a round of applause. The Pan-African Parliament President, Honorable Chief Fortune Charumbira, the Minister of Justice, Honorable Lamola, also acknowledging the presence of the diplomatic corps. I'm not so sure how many ambassadors are still left, but I know that our High Commissioner is present here, His Excellency Veiko Ngiwete. I also want to acknowledge the presence of the leadership of National Youth Development Agency, led by our host, Ms. Karabo, as well as your board members. And the APRM, I've worked a lot on the APRM review in Namibia, so I know exactly your work, what you entail in the leadership. Let me rise on the protocol that was already established and say good afternoon. In Namibia, we greet, eh? Good afternoon. Thank you very much. At the onset, I would like to congratulate the government of South Africa and the people of South Africa for celebrating 30 years of freedom. In Namibia, last month, we just celebrated 34 years, so we are not far apart, and we do share in your achievements, the excitements, and I was reading one of the remarks that the president made to say that 30 years from where 1994 was and now South Africa has changed. And I think we have to attribute that to the leaders and applaud them for the good work that they are doing. In discussing the topic that I was given, viable economic pathways, you know, as from the youth ministry, we always do things differently. So I've decided to rather do a presentation instead of going through a speech, because I want it to be interactive and I want you to follow. So very excited to address young people, young leaders, and the leaders of today and the future. The presentation will discuss, it's going to be short, but I'll be taking you through, firstly introducing the topic, look at policy imperatives, because you cannot talk of viable economic pathways without the enabling environment that ensure that economic development takes place. And then obviously, as Tulani from APRM said, that with every opportunities, there are threats. So I'll be discussing opportunities, and then I'll take you through challenges, and I'll conclude with proposed interventions. A lot have been said. I think a lot have been said in terms of the population where we stand now. Africa holding the largest majority, 60% being young people. And with the 60% being below the age of 25, and the World Bank has estimated that by 2050, we foresee this population doubling to over 830 million of young people. And again, emphasizing the issue that young people are not just beneficiaries of development, but they play a critical role in that they are agents of change and innovation. And realizing the regional and continental integration agenda, young people are at the center. We've just concluded the panel discussion that talks in depth about the AFCFTA that have produced the protocol on women and youth. Very important because we realize that we cannot leave this demographic dividend that we host. And emphasizing on the need for SMEs, we understand that jobs are diminishing. I'm not so sure in terms of how it looks like in South Africa, but I do know that in Namibia, we stand at around 32% of youth unemployment. Now, with youth unemployment or unemployment diminishing, entrepreneurship now become one of the opportunity, one of the option for us to create jobs and also to promote income. In Namibia, I just want to drive it home that we've just concluded the census, and the preliminary results shows that 71% of our population is under the age of 35. Again, just emphasizing that we are a youthful nation. Some of the policy imperatives that I have highlighted will guide the economic pathways that we are talking about is the African Youth Charter, that guides the youth development on the continent, the Agenda 2063 for the Africa that we want. This Agenda 2063 places, focuses on youth-centric, youth and women. And also the SDGs, some of these policies that guides the development of no one should feel left out or leave no one behind. Honorable Dr. Pandor spoke at length about it. In Namibia, our development plan is a Vision 2030. Just like the NDP 2030, we are also not so far from achieving these goals that we've put in, and monitoring and implementing becomes very important. And I want to draw your attention to a